Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's Ukraine War news update. First part thereof for the 6th of May 2024. In the UK, this is a bank holiday. We have this Monday off. I work from home anyway, self-employed, all that kind of stuff, so it makes no odds. But I have had a rather massive lie-in. I am so behind on sleep, so I'm sorry that this is a little later than it should be. But my goodness, I should be also benefiting a lot from some much needed sleep. So personnel, well, we'll go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to this video below. 1,040 personnel lost. That is getting back up to above 1,000. It's been a really heavy week for Russian personnel losses. We had 7 days, I think it was, over 1,000, and then yesterday dipped below. Today it has dipped back above. We have seen Ukrainian general staff are claiming that 5 tanks were taken out yesterday, and that is lower than we have seen. 34 armoured personnel vehicles, however, is an uptick, as is 38 artillery systems. So some pretty heavy figures for the Russians here. And then we have 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 59 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 6 pieces of special equipment. So these are pretty high numbers across a number of these categories that would indicate a bad day for the Russians. Now, something that keeps coming up in the threads, often I think from trolls, but sometimes some, I don't know, maybe some neutral people questioning that, you know, what's going on. Here are the general staff figures, and here are Andrew Perpetua's loss statistics for the day before. So if we look at Andrew Perpetua's loss stats, we can see it's another day of parity. In fact, slightly more Ukrainian losses than Russians. Now, this is a rarity. This doesn't happen often, and it rarely happens 2 days in a row. So there's something to be said about these stats. What does it show us? What is the story that's being told? But I have to reiterate that what we see on social media does not correlate chronologically, or at least instantaneously, with the figures that we see with the general staff claims. The general staff figures are what took place the day before, as according to the way they generate their statistics. I wonder if there's ever a lag with those as well, though. So that could confuse matters as well. So when they're getting information in, is it, well, actually, we've just finally got the info from this unit from the 115th Brigade or whatever, and actually we were expecting that last night, but or we're expecting it 3 days ago. It's just come in now. Like, is there a lag in any of the ways that they generate their statistics? So that's the first question. And then we have what goes up onto social media. So when these things happen, they don't go onto social media as soon as that has happened. It often takes time for them to be edited together and published, and often they're published as montages. And montages are, represent or an array of hits that have taken place, sometimes over a week, sometimes over a couple of days, sometimes over a month. And sometimes we get video footage that finds its way onto the internet maybe months after it was actually taken. As I've said to you a number of times, Constantine, who is someone that often appears on Andrew Perpetua's live streams, he has done a lot of fundraising for drones, and he spoke to a drone operator that he had actually given drones to and forgotten he had done that for him. I was like, oh, mate, brilliant. How's it all going? And the drone operator's like, oh, I've got all this footage of loads of stuff that we've done. And Constantine was, well, have you put that onto the internet? He's like, no, not one bit. And there was one drone operator that had, like, I don't know what the numbers were, but it's going to be like dozens and dozens of hits, and he'd not put a single one onto the internet. So that does a couple of things. First of all, it shows you that you will not see a one-to-one with regard to open source intelligence sources and visually confirmed hits through video and still imagery on the internet. You will not see a one-to-one with those and what is claimed, what the reality is. There are going to be vast numbers, or at least, not vast, there will be numbers of equipment that are destroyed that you don't get to see being destroyed, and you don't see evidence of it being destroyed. Now, you hope that eventually it comes out in the wash with regard to the sorts of work that Andrew Perpetua and his team do. What I mean by that is that yes, we'll get first-person view video footage of a drone smacking into a tank. And that tells you that that tank has been hit. You don't know necessarily whether it's been damaged or blown up, but that's often geolocatable. And then you get spotter drone, reconnaissance drone footage in the air that's surveying a large area, and then someone is geolocating everything that you can see on that. And sometimes that marries up with the first-person drone footage that you saw. Like, right, we didn't know what damage had been done, and now we can see that this tank has been abandoned and looks to be damaged beyond reasonable usage. And so there are lots of ways to there are lots of ways that you can see war footage, reconnaissance, first-person view, etc., and different types of reconnaissance and different distances and etc., and satellite imagery, and then different resolution of satellite imagery. And what's really useful about what Andrew Perpetua does as a team is he has one team working on all of these things together, rather than getting a bit of data from here, a bit of data from there, a bit of data from there, and you have to do the kind of compiling and aggregation, etc. No, you've got this one team doing that and then producing what is hopefully consistent and comparable data, because they all use the same criteria as to what is damaged, what is destroyed, what is abandoned, what qualifies as X, Y, and Z. But it won't necessarily. So when he produces his figures like this won't be what happened yesterday, and this won't be what you see on today's figures. So there will be a lag between what the General Staff claim and what you see on the socials, and that might also not marry up particularly well as well, because what you then see on the socials, as we can see here, will have montages that have taken place over a large period of time. So these attacks on Bukankas and pickup trucks will be probably from the same bit of footage, and that could have taken place over 2 weeks. And therefore, it's very difficult to marry that up with the daily stats that come out. And you have to sort of take an average look at things. And you'll get days where massive drops of video footage, or what was it the other day that Magyar dropped a video with 140 clips on, and there you've got arguably 140 pieces of equipment that need to be added to a single day, but they wouldn't have happened on that single day. So there are lots of questions about all of this, of course, but don't criticize the General Staff figures because they don't marry up with Andrew Perpetua's figures on a daily basis, and don't criticize Andrew Perpetua's figures because they don't marry up with the General Staff. We have to build a picture, and that is generally more accurate if you build it over time. What I seek to do is to say that look at the ratios of what are being lost. Don't concentrate too much on the total figures. And we need to concentrate on what's happening on a daily basis to see a trend, or a weekly basis to see what the trends are. And we've seen this week, for example, that we have had really heavy losses in personnel and equipment. And that tells us that something is going on the front line. And then we look to places like Avdiivka, Ocheritina, and Krasnohorivka, Chasiv Yar, of course, and Novomykhailivka, and see that, there are movements on the battlefield, and this is correlating with heavy losses. And we can therefore we can present a hypothesis that the Russians are making gains on the battlefield, but it is coming at a huge loss. And then we see this kind of evidence to support that. And then Andrew Perpetua comes out with saying, well, we've just looked at, for example, in the Torsk-Terny area, when they were attacking there, in the Novomykhailivka area, other open source intelligence outlets have said, right, we've got 320 or 312 lost units around Novomykhailivka. This is incredibly costly for the Russians. And that's how we build up this picture. Anyway, I just had to say something about that. Then it's worth saying that Dell, who does the data presentation, I'm due to, if I have time today, that's my extra. I keep promising Dell I'm going to do an extra on surveying the stats from the general staff over time, so we can look at the graphs again and see what's been going on for the last month or so. He said this weekend to me on Sunday, he said there's been some funny stuff going on with the general staff figures. They posted a note to say they've made some manual adjustments to the total figures. And I don't know quite what that means. He says, I've entered today's figures and may need to readjust once I've seen tomorrow's figures, is what he said yesterday. He said, I have incorporated the changes made by the general staff to the stats on the 5th of May. It doesn't have any noticeable impact on the bigger picture. I've highlighted the amendments in the data tab. So we'll look at that hopefully later today. And it appears that they've made some adjustments. I don't know what those are and why they've been made, but just sort of shout that out to you. Right, going to yesterday's figures from the socials, it looks like Ukraine have had a worse day prima facie in terms of numbers of equipment lost than the Russians. And actually, if it's worse in terms of losing more than Russians, then that is really bad, because a bad day for them really is anything under a 3-to-1 Russian to Ukrainian loss ratio. Well, this is now getting above 1-to-1 in terms of their losses to Russian losses. So anyway, we have a boat that's been destroyed. We have a couple of howitzers. We have 5 tanks, one of which is an Abrams, one of which is a Leopard A5. Shelling and Lancet took out Leopard A5. They claim it's destroyed, but Andrew says he can't tell. So that he's got it down as damaged. And the M1 Abrams Lancet looks like an engine fire has been destroyed. So there are more and more of these newer Western tanks getting destroyed as the attrition over time eats through the older Soviet era equipment like your T-64s, T-62s, T-72s and whatnot. We have an abandoned Bradley. We have a YPR 765, which is the Dutch version of the M113 tracked armored personnel carrier. We do have a BRDM and BTR and MTLB, so APCs and whatnot. MRAP Max Pro 1, and then quite a lot of civilian vehicles taken out there. So I guess luckily, or if you want to be rose tinted glasses looking at these Ukrainian stats, it's that a large proportion of them are civilians type vehicles like vans and pickup trucks and whatnot. Now, when we go to the Russian losses, we have a boat being destroyed for them. That's probably the one, drone laid mine. So that's the one I showed you yesterday, the footage, which some of you in the thread said, definitely was a mine that blew it up. And that seems to be the case there. BM-21 Grad. So we've seen a number of Grads, multiple launch rocket systems, on video footage recently. I haven't showed them to you or referenced them, but I've seen a number of pieces of video of them being destroyed. There's another one added here. We have a tracked garden shed. I will show you that in a second. That is one of these turtle tanks. I like what he said there. A few other tanks, a couple of IFVs, a couple of APCs, trucks, and then quite a few civilian vehicles there. So nothing hugely valuable. And although a lot of them destroyed and abandoned, so that is a good sign for the Ukrainians that most of those are properly taken out. So it could be a captured tank, T-64 captured, fell in a hole for the Ukrainians there. I missed that one. So a bad day, I think, for the Ukrainians all in, really, to have stats like that. Right, when we look at what is being said about what's happened over the last day, Euromaidan Press summarizes that Ukraine targeted 3 Russian radar stations and 2 air defense systems over the past day. We haven't seen that on the stats there either. I guess that would fall under anti-aircraft warfare systems. It depends whether radars go under that or under special equipment. But anyway, the Euromaidan press says 3 Russian radar systems, 2 air defense systems over the past day have been targeted. Meanwhile, Russian troops carried out 2 missile and 120 aviation strikes. 120 aviation strikes. This is where they have the massive advantage at the moment. That air advantage where they can fly fairly safely behind enemy lines. Yes, they apparently lost Su-25 aircraft over the weekend, but essentially they are just pummeling the front line with these aviation bombs. And 89 shellings of Ukrainian positions and civilian areas there. Here we have, I think, exactly what we've been talking about over the last sort of 2 months. We started to see the these golf carts, the Desert Cross 1000-3s, being used far more frequently. We've seen motorbikes, we've seen quads, all sorts of vehicles adapted with all sorts of crazy stuff. And the question is that optimal for the Russians? Are they using them because they have to, or would they otherwise be using more bespoke, manufactured in a Russian munitions factory type or mechanized plant type scenario? You know, we are seeing a Mad Max approach to the Russian mechanized equipment that could be interpreted as desperation. Although they do also do a job sometimes, a pretty good job. So this is a Russian saying, on my own behalf, I'd also like to note the trend that I wrote about before the war, about physical education, preparation. Some motorized rifle units suffered serious losses in armored vehicles, and the level of their recovery is inferior to the level of losses. So he is saying, as a Russian, we are not replacing our losses in mechanized equipment. Therefore, some motorized rifle battalions become motorized on trucks. In other words, we are then having to attack on trucks rather than attack on IFV, infantry fighting vehicles, and APCs. And even some are riflemen, which is infantrymen. In other words, they move, as he says here, that they move on foot along with their property. So we are now attacking on foot more than we should be because we don't have the armoured vehicles to attack with. On the one hand, we need transport. On the other hand, while they're looking for transport, they need serious physical exercise. So he's looking at this as like, I did tell you that we've got unfit soldiers, and this is the best way to keep them fit, which is not having APCs and IFVs and making them walk or run. There were some claims in the early part of the attack on Chaziv Yar that some of the Russian soldiers were having to walk something like, 3 kilometers or something to get to the outskirts of Ivanivska to do their fighting there. And this shows that they just didn't have the equipment. Anyway, he finishes here. On the other hand, while they're looking for transport, they need serious physical exercise. And even after finding at least horse-drawn carts, the Fizuzha will still be needed. I don't quite know what that means, other than people are being forced to walk, where otherwise they would be using mechanized equipment. Right. Some strikes here in Belgorod. Apparently 6 dead and more than 30 wounded, reported as unknown drones attack Russian gazelles. So I think these are coaches with Iranian instructors who are working with Shaheeds in the Belgorod region. Interesting. So we had some strikes on Iranian instructors way back when in Crimea, back just as they were starting to receive the Shaheeds for the very first time. Goodness knows when that was now, a year and a half ago or something. And interesting that they're now targeting those in Belgorod. Not heard them sort of training there before. Russians are making a lot of wooden mock-ups here. This is one of those things where you think, right, an ATACMS is probably a good thing here. Because, and you might think, well, is that waste of ATACMS? This is low value equipment here because it's just piles of wood and it's, etc., etc. But it's the same calculation as using quite an expensive missile to take down a drone. So a reconnaissance drone, like an Orlan 10 or Orlan 30, you think, well, that's only $10,000 or whatever it is, and you've used the $100,000 missile to shoot it down. That's not worth it. Yes, it is, because that Orlan 10 is spotting for Iskanders or Lancets or this and that end up doing like a couple of $1 million worth of damage. And so by taking out a $10,000 drone is what its function is. And the function is facilitating the destruction of like $1 million worth of Ukrainian kit. So spending $100,000 on a missile to take a cheap drone out of the sky has the functional outcome of saving millions of dollars worth of kit. So you're expending $100,000 and you're saving millions of dollars or whatever. So here, these wooden mock-ups would be using up quite a lot of expensive kit. Now, it might be cheap FPV drones that eventually blow up these wooden howitzers, but it might be more expensive stuff. It could be shelling. It could be all the time and effort put into finding these targets and taking them out. And actually, an ATACMS to take out that site there might be a good return, or give you a good return on investment. So, also the personnel there. There's quite a lot of trucks, Bukankas, people. Definitely some what look like not decoys there. I don't know whether these could be, I guess, APC decoys. I don't know, but it certainly looks like that's a valuable target to me. And then here we have the Russians learning quickly, as someone says. You've got a mortar crew being able to, one presumes, shoot off their mortars then here from this sort of dugout, and then bring over a retractable roof that has turf on top. And actually, that's really good. I mean, that is pretty decent disguise there. You wouldn't know from a drone in the sky, really, that was a mortar position. So that's the sort of thing that the Russians are doing, and you'd hope the Ukrainians as well. Here's an abandoned Russian. So this was from April the 25th. So this is a Russian turtle tank on the Krasnoyarivka front, which we knew about previously. Russian turtle tanks, we've seen lots of these be used and targeted as well. Sort of various footage. Here's a tank being built up into one of those turtle tanks, and another Russian turtle tank here. My goodness, that looks like a shed. And this is what Andrew Perpetua was talking about a garden shed being destroyed or damaged. Turtle tanks are becoming more and more common, says Special Kherson Cat here. If we just look at this one. Now, the question is, when you see stuff like this, is this the optimal use of that tank? That tank can't turn its turret. Is it because it's a broken tank? Or are they restricting that tank because actually it's more useful to be used like this as a glorified APC, essentially? So people are hidden under here, and then they can get out from hatches when it delivers them. And quite often you see these as mine rollers. They clear the route to a particular target location, offload people, and then do a UE and go back. Is that good? Could they be using other things? Here's one with a mine roller. It's still an open question, I think. This is proper Mad Max territory, isn't it? Really is. But this, if this does a job, then this could be, if this is more successful in what it does than having that tank do just its normal tank duties, then this is clever adaptation that has their place, rather than being desperation. They have to do that, because they've got no other option. Here's a turtle tank on the Bilohorivka front, but I don't know if it is no longer moving because it's been disabled. So that could be one of these garden shed entries. I'm not sure. And then Russian attack with the use of a turtle tank on the Bakhmut front. Smoke cover is also actively used. One of the tanks hits a mine twice. So there's lots of footage regarding the usage of these tanks. This is probably a fairly interesting bit of footage because we can see combined arms maneuvers. We can see smoke being used. This might be a more sensible usage of Russian kit, but I don't know what lasts and what doesn't there. Anyway, you can go and look at all that at your leisure. Then Andrew Perpetua having a bit of a rant, and rightly so. The extreme pride Russians are taking in destroying a human aid truck that was delivering clean water to old women is honestly both sickening and completely expected. And so he's got just a load of Telegram entries on this water truck that was destroyed, and then people being happy about that or being angry, depending on which side of the fence they're on. geolocating everything. It's just it says the video that brings all of Russia such tremendous pride. This is their version of landing on the moon, and he actually has that. You can see it's almost being reported here somewhere. So yeah. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that one in there. Right. Ukraine's military intelligence says a guy killed by a car bomb was the organizer of a torture facility, one of the organizers, in the occupied part of Zaporizhia Oblast. Yevgeny Ananevsky was killed in his car this morning. He worked at Berdyansk Correctional Colony number 77. So there's a bit of patriot activity, subterfuge, partisan activity going on behind the lines. Actually, that may be the case also in Chechnya here. Adam Kadyrov's car was burned in the center of Grozny. He is the 16-year-old son of Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen warlord, who has, as you can see, it's being set on fire here by someone who has been, awarded the Hero of Chechnya award. He has been given, I think, the position of being in charge of the Chechen. There you go. So that's been set on fire. The Chechen Special Forces, I think. He's also affiliated with the Special Forces University there. So he is a major player, even though he's only 16. A major player in the Chechen setup. He was awarded that Hero of Chechnya award shortly after the video of him beating up that prisoner it came out onto the socials. Anyway, as far as distance munitions go, strikes on Ukraine and Russia occupied Ukraine. There were 13 Shaheeds shot into Ukraine last night, 12 of them shot down. I don't know any information outside of this, so I've not seen anything else on the socials about whether the debris from these caused any problems or whether that one that got through caused any issues. I'm sure it did, but just no information about that. Explosions are ringing out in Mariupol as we speak. That's sort of coming out now. So the Ukrainians are active in striking during the daytime now. And then what most people are talking about is this. So this is a Magura V5 maritime naval drone, USV, unmanned surface vehicle. I wonder about this. Part of me thinks that this is driving around a port looking for a target as opposed to knowing what it's going to hit, and ends up really not seeing anything in Vuzka Bay in Chornomorska. And then, as you can see, it's being shot at here. So by small arms fire and mortars or something, grenade launchers, who knows. But in the end, it goes, you can see it's just going left and right, looking for something, and then finds a rigid inflatable boat, an attack craft of the Russians, and then goes for that strike. And I don't know if that is because it basically has to. So it takes out that. Maybe because it can't find anything else. Interesting if that is the case. I don't know if you would put on a mission like that with a drone that's probably worth more than that boat to go all the way to Crimea, to that bay, to then take out the attack craft. So, yeah, interesting. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. But nonetheless, that is a Russian craft that's been hit, so it's a success. It's just whether it's worth it. Ukrainian unmanned boats activity off Crimea, says Rebar, the pro-Russian source. This night, Ukrainian forces attempted to attack the base of the Black Sea Fleet and Russian FSB border guard service in Chernomorsk with 4 unmanned boats. So there were 4 of them, apparently. At around 4 to 5 a.m., the 4 unmanned boats were detected by Russian servicemen and fire was opened on them. As a result, the drones were destroyed near the booms, failing to break through the Uskaya Bay. The situation demonstrates once again the importance of such elementary things as booms. Their presence simply did not allow the maritime drones to penetrate the base point and easily repel the attack. However, this group of unmanned boats was not the only one. Another group of drones was spotted off Cape Tarkankut. After their movement was detected, the crewless boats turned around and departed in the opposite direction. So the claim here is that you had some activity around here where they did a UE and went back because they were detected. And then you had an attack on Chornomorska that was apparently repelled, although we've got evidence that one rib was destroyed there, or it was certainly hit by that drone. So, yeah, it could well be that Rebar is partially correct here in that the other drones, if there were, we've got no evidence there were other drones, but it wouldn't surprise me. I doubt you just send one on its own. But they do have a job in trying to get past the port defences. Same can be said about Sevastopol. I don't know what this is referring to in part of the infographic here, where you've got, it says British Air Force, some kind of, I presume, reconnaissance plane, 100 kilometers off Sevastopol, and you've got something disappeared after detection. So maybe some drones went to near the Kerch Straits as well and did a UE after being detected. But although they didn't mention it, he didn't mention it there. But yeah, so interesting. It could be below. The activity of unmanned boats has increased near the Crimean Peninsula. The day before yesterday, about 5 or 6 drones appeared near the Kerch Strait, which caused the bridge to be blocked. The search of the drones lasted for several hours, but the boats fled in an unknown direction. The number of boats these days indicates that the AFU is assessing the condition of defensive fortifications in Crimea. The presence of drones has been noted at the bridge at Tarkankut and Chornomorsky in small numbers, while the attack on the BDC involved more than 10 boats at a time. In this case, according to the already classic scheme before the attack in the Crimea operated British in attacking Crimea, there was the operation of a British reconnaissance aircraft, an RC-135, which was located 100 kilometers southwest of Sevastopol. Given this and the upcoming weekend in Russia, massive strikes by the AFU should be expected. Moreover, the enemy has been holding a pause for several days now, clearly accumulating forces for an attack. Interesting. So with the May the 9th celebrations, the Victory Day celebrations that Russia will hold in Moscow, you can imagine that Ukrainians might be lining up for a major attack, possibly with naval drones there. According to the Russian fighter bomb channel, Ukrainians have mounted air defense systems. So the fighter bomb is fairly reliable. He's a Russian pilot, but basically does report when Russian planes are shot down and pilots are lost. He's saying that Ukrainians have mounted air defense systems using the R-60, R-70 missiles with a thermal homing head on their naval drones. According to him, the system is not working properly at the moment, but at the same time, a couple of Russian helicopters have crashed near Crimea in recent months. They could well have been. So I've reported them, but some time ago now, where the claim is that they've gone down due to technical faults, but you're not quite sure what has been going on. Well, actually, it could be that Ukrainian drones, sea drones, have been operating, maritime drones, with these missiles on board. Special Herson Cat here saying Russian sources claim that they've seen the Ukrainian naval drones with installed air-to-air missiles. So that is an evolution of those drones that could well be causing the Russians some problems. And then we go on to a strike from the other day, just some more information out about it. So we have, if we look at the GIF here, I don't know, I can't make GIFs bigger, can I? So I'll have to make the screen a little bit bigger there. So you can see some blackening of areas around there. The problem is it's very poor resolution imagery, but certainly something has changed. Just quite what, we're not sure from that. However, GeoConfirm says, did Ukraine target an Iskander site? So Iskander M and K missiles are ballistic missiles that are the Iskander M, no, or whatever. Anyway, they've targeted an Iskander site using ATACMS on the 4th of May. We have confirmation that through satellite imagery that at the selected site, what seems to be Iskander launchers and other vehicles were present in significant numbers, over 10 of them, a few days before the reported strike. Unfortunately, we cannot share these satellite imagery due to copyright restrictions. So quite often you can buy satellite imagery, but you're not allowed to put them on social media. You can use them for your own analysis, but part of the copyright restrictions mean that you can't show them. So what GeoConfirmed is saying, we've got that imagery. We know that there were large numbers of Iskander vehicles, launchers and whatnot at this one particular place. Then Sentinel as satellite imagery, so this is your cheaper low resolution imagery, from April the 15th to May the 5th, shows vehicle movements marked in the red squares. So the imagery also captured the result of fires erupting at different locations within the site. Key facts. Pre-strike evidence, the site was identified as an Iskander launch site with over 10 vehicles present a few days before May the 4th. Fires on May the 4th, fires were observed at different locations within the site on May the 4th by firms, and I showed you that firms in imagery. You remember those block red squares? And are saying that apparently the Russians claim they shot down 4 ATACMS, but here is a site where there is large-scale fires that have taken place. And large-scale fires from firms imagery, which is a NASA wildfires satellite imagery, that's originally what they were designed for, but now you can use them to work out if things have been blown up. And, considerable fires are going on at a location potentially over a prolonged period. So the firm's data showed that there were a whole bunch of fires around there, and I showed that to you. And here they're saying that at that site, we know that there were 10 Iskander vehicles and related equipment before the date, and we know that there was firms data at that position to suggest that things were on fire. Aftermath of the fire was visible on the 5th of May by Sentinel. So that's that imagery there. So that's the aftermath of the fire, but it's low resolution imagery, so you can't really tell all that much from it. However, we know firms that there were big fires there. And you don't have big fires from ATACMS missiles, especially if they're submunitions, cluster missiles. Those cluster munitions just exploding on their own in the middle of nowhere would not give you firms data. So that something had to have caught fire. Well, was it just a building? Was it a big pile of wood? Or was it explodable equipment like an Iskander launcher? Insinuation is... So the aftermath of the fires was visible on that Sentinel imagery. The claims were from the Russians that 4 ATACMS were shot down that night. But the insinuation that the vehicles were damaged or destroyed is quite clear. Given the timing, the Russian MOD's announcement and the history of the site, the evidence strongly points to the fires being the result of an ATACMS strike, rather than random or accidental occurrence. The damage or destruction of vehicles requires further investigation following the emergence of new footage. So I think this is probably good news for the Ukrainians that some serious Iskander equipment was probably damaged or destroyed. I think that's what we can take from that. But this is good. This is why I love open source intelligence. It's just great. It's like if it wasn't for OSINT, we'd just be listening to what the Russian MOD say and what the Ukrainian MOD say, and it's like we'd have no idea. But you've got people getting access themselves to satellite imagery, piecing all of the bits of the jigsaw together, and then coming up with a probability assessment of what has happened. Okay, following the arrest of Shoigu, so moving on to other bits and pieces, Shoigu's deputy Timur Ivanov, so the second richest person in Russia, who's got mansions and has been arrested for corruption. But as I said before, everyone is involved in corruption, so he's not been arrested for corruption. It's just his time. Why is it now his time to be arrested? What's he done? What threat is he to Putin? Because Putin's got stuff on everyone, so it's just everyone is compromised in Russia, you would have thought. Anyway, the Russian military correspondents speculate that Alexei Dyumin might replace Shoigu. So people have been wondering, because the deputy has gone now, he's been arrested, and the third in charge has also been taken in for questioning. I don't know what's happened with him. But everyone's talking about how Shoigu's days are numbered. And now they're speculating that this chap, Alexei Dyumin, might replace Shoigu as Russian defense minister. And here's the interesting part. Surovikin, so the guy that was responsible for the Surovikin lines, in charge of the war effort that was then moved sideways because he seemed to be somewhat supportive of Prigozhin's mutiny. Then he was sent off, I think, to Algeria. Was one of the places Surovikin has been. He's basically been sent into the wilderness. Now could be the time to get him back, because actually, as horrible as he was a butcher of Syria, I think, as well. He's a person with a horrible past, but an effective, history of effective warfare. Although it's horrific, like he is actually in a good position to take the Russian war effort on, to take over from some of these people. So he might replace Shoigu as Russian defense minister. Surovikin might be appointed chief of general staff instead of Gerasimov on May the 7th. That's what people are talking about. Now, I've been saying that Gerasimov is likely injured or not well enough to take on to continue in his role. So that would make an awful lot of sense. They'll probably come up with some nonsense about him X, Y, and Z. Like they've come up with he's dislocated his knee. I mean, it seems to me that he was injured in the strike in Crimea from when he then disappeared for some time, then reappeared, not seeming to know what he was doing. He looks very ill or discombobulated. But the claim was at the time that there was a strike in Crimea and perhaps Gerasimov was there and this was a really high value strike. Then Gerasimov disappeared. Then he turned up and put some medals on someone's chest, a few soldiers' chest, like some months later. And then he was seen voting with Shoigu, but Shoigu seemed to be absolutely fine, operating as you'd expect him to do. Gerasimov seemed physically not quite all there. And subsequent times that we've seen him, he's just not seen to be all there. So that wouldn't surprise me if he's going to be replaced by Surovikin. It would be an interesting move. Max 23 reports that, CBC reports that, quote, our army works according to NATO standards, says the Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. We implemented all the needed reforms and now we are a step before invitation. So the argument from the Ukrainians is we have done all that we've been asking in terms of accession to NATO. Our army is operating to NATO standards, and all we're waiting for is the invitation. Shmyhal called on the G7 and the European Union to work together to protect not only the Ukrainian people, but also democratic values. Quote, we protect European values, European borders, and we protect borders of the civilized world, Shmyhal said, adding that supporting Ukraine is necessary to protect a global future. I wouldn't disagree with him at all with those claims. Now, Putin, a few people are talking about this. On Putin's orders, the Russian Defense Ministry is to hold a tactical nuclear weapons drills in, quote, in response to provocative statements and threats by certain Western officials towards Russia. The drills will be held in the near future, the ministry says. This is classic nuclear saber rattling. So Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov now clarifies that the provocative statements in question concern the possible deployment of NATO troops to Ukraine. He claims such comments from the West make an unprecedented escalation in tensions with Russia. So it's kind of responding to the French and other nations' claims that it's not off the table. So we're going to hold nuclear drills, and this is all they have. This is all they have in a tank in terms of deterring the West from helping Ukraine. It's the nuclear thing. We just have to, I mean, someone like Jake Sullivan is beholden to this, but other people less so. And you know what? Other people have nukes as well. And this is, I don't want to dismiss the threat of nuclear war and minimize this, but the being beholden to those Russian threats is exactly what Russia wants. I think there's a lot of brinkmanship here. There's a lot of saber rattling. There's a lot of what has previously been empty threats. So this is not too dissimilar to what we've seen with, well, if you provide HIMARS, if you provide M777s, if you provide F-16s, right, we do all those things, and then they go silent. And it's like, okay, now we're talking about NATO troops or bilateral troop supply, and this is what Russia say. Oh, we're gonna do nuclear drills. Okay, well, don't cry wolf. On the one hand, the last 6 times nothing's happened, but on the other hand, this could be the time. So it's yeah, it is a threat. My take on it is it's a threat that we've probably got good reason to dismiss. Okay. The SSU, so the kind of intelligence security services of the Ukrainians, have detained an FSB agent group that was preparing massive airstrikes in Ukraine on the eve of Easter. Among the priority targets of the Russians were energy generating enterprises and logistics warehouses for fuel and lubricants. Now, this is not unusual. This sort of stuff happens almost daily. I could report this to you, but every so often they go, oh, just to remind you this is happening. Among the priority, In addition, the Russians hope to get confirmation from their agents about the current geolocation of military airfields and special forces guarding the general staff of the armed forces of Ukraine. Perpetrators face life imprisonment. It's good to see these people being arrested. There is a lot of problem with collaborators behind Ukrainian lines right across Ukraine, because obviously of the history with Russia, and not everyone in Ukraine is pro-Ukrainian independence. Now, Tochny have done a video specifically on Mariupol, a Mariupol report or special. I just wanted to A, point people towards that, and B, remind people that Russia are consistently involved in war crimes. During yesterday's Tochny stream, Wendy Dyers, or actually, no, Jonathan. So Jonathan, I interviewed Jonathan. He is interested in the cultural aspect to this war. We talked about how the Russians have been involved in cultural attempt to culturally wipe out Ukraine, and so many poets and artists and cultural icons have been either purposefully wiped out or have been killed as a result of the war, which goes towards this kind of cultural destruction of Ukraine and its identity. But anyway, Jonathan has investigated how Russians have stolen art from Mariupol, a terrible crime against Ukrainian culture and identity. I don't know, I might see if Jonathan's up for coming on again and talking about what he has found out there. But yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? These war crimes that are so consistently perpetrated alongside the outright war that's taking place. We need constant reminders, don't we, of how terrible the Russians are in their prosecution of this war. And then finally, for some reason, there's a wild campaign of misinformation being spread on social media concerning the apparent use of French troops, that some amount of troops are working inside Ukraine. I've seen this from a number of different sources that I often use talking about this, and then a couple of them taking it down. Just be warned that it's out there that the French are operating inside Ukraine, but it is not true, as far as I can tell. It came from Asia Times, and the source from that article, in that article, is highly disreputable, and it's almost certainly complete nonsense. But yeah, be warned, if you do read about that, it's almost certainly untrue. Anyway, that's enough from me. Quite a long one today. Lots of stuff going on. Take care. Speak soon.